Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. Today we are going to be making a couple of these rustic benches, and I wanted to make this as simple as possible, so I only used 2x4s. And the first thing that I needed to do was to cut down all of the 2x4s, which is 3.5 by 1.5, into these 3-inch blocks, and that makes it easier to work with, and it makes it so I can make a 3x3 leg, which you see down there. And so all I do to do that is run it through the table saw at 3.25, and then I flip it and set the table saw to 3 inches and run it through again. And then I got a 3-inch block. This whole project is made out of the 3-inch material, and in some places I cut this 3-inch in half to use like a 2x2, which is a 1.5 by 1.5, but you know how that goes. Anyway, we're going to start by gluing up the top first. Okay, so here I am doing the glue up. I didn't use any kind of connection except for glue, and the only thing other stuff would do would just keep it straight while I clamp it up. But since this is rustic, I just went straight for the glue and clamped it up like that, and it is plenty strong. Put some stuff there to hopefully keep it straight. I had to sand it up later, but here I am doing a round over on the top side of the bench, and after I get all the corners there, so everything's rounded nicely. Then on the bottom I'm doing a chamfer bit, which is just like a little diagonal thing, whatever you want to call it. Makes for a good profile and a comfortable grip to pick it up. You could just do round overs on top and bottom too, doesn't matter. Give it a little sanding. Keep it smooth. I think I use like a 220 on that. And now you can see the round over on one side and the chamfer on the other. Makes for a good profile. Alright, so here I am assembling the leg. I just use a spacer block for where my cross pieces are going to attach later. And I just have a system of 3 blocks that I'm going to attach. I screw pilot holes in here so I don't split the wood. And then I go ahead and use 2.5-inch screws to screw it down and clamp the glue. Oh, you know what I'm doing right now is I'm getting the screw started because I haven't put the glue on yet. There's the glue. So I'm gluing it up, put plenty of glue on there, and then I pop it down. Now I want to make sure this does not slide when I screw it, so I'm going to use some clamps to keep the edges flush when I screw those 2 pieces down. And this actually worked out really well for the most part. As long as you clamp it where it's supposed to be, then you can just screw it down. Now you could just clamp these instead of screwing them if you want to avoid screws in your project or screw holes, but I was impatient, so I used screws to clamp it down. And since it's, once again, it's rustic, so I can afford to have screw holes showing. And this is me clamping the other piece down, all according to my process for creating cross pieces later. Alright, so now I'm doing the tapered feet, and I just cut a 45 halfway through the 3 inches, so 1.5. So you cut 145, then you just flip it really and cut another one. And I made a video about cutting these feet because each one has to be cut differently than the other. But this is the long and short of how it's cut, which is just make 245 cuts, and then you have a tapered foot, and it's looking good. I marked each one of mine there. So here's all 4 of them. You got to make sure they make this flower pattern, so each one has a different orientation. So here I'm doing a round over. Help them look sharp in the end. And after I do that round over, I go ahead and pull out the sander, sand it all up. I think this is 220, maybe 120. Doesn't really matter because I'm going to burn it later. So 120 or 220, whatever you want to do. Yep, keep on sanding. Alright, so here's the leg assemblies. Right now I'm making the cross pieces that go into the dados that I left on each leg, and now you see why those things are important, why the spaces were left anyway. Just nailed and glued these ones together. Well, messed that one up, so I'm gonna clamp it before I finish it. Now I'm ready. Okay, now we can pop it in there. I'll glue those in eventually. And then I complete the round over since they aren't rounded and the rest of it is. I just finish up the round over on the pieces I just attached to the leg assemblies. Make sure every piece that I can round over I do. There's actually some parts I had to sand right there. So I put the long cross piece across, and you want to make sure this long stretcher is super straight, otherwise your legs won't sit straight. These ones sat mostly straight. Once the top was on and they sat on the ground, it kept the feet flush on the ground. Now you can always use leveling feet if you want to screw into the feet. So here I am starting my conditioning process. For the leg assemblies, I just toasted the wood and left it like that. For these, I'm burning, for the tops, I'm burning it real deep because I want to come back and scrape it with a wire scraper. And that's going to get all the soft burnt wood out of the grooves to get a real good rustic look later on with the rest of the finish. And I cleaned up all this dust with some water. I'm using some black stain on the leg assemblies, and it's looking good. And this is the top. And don't blink or you miss it. I put some dark walnut, some black, and then some carbon gray stain over the top. And then I got some whitewash, which is just white paint and water. Throw that over there. And once it's dry, I go ahead and sand it up to give it a more distressed look, especially around the edges. And that is all there is to it. It makes a really good, easy finish. And it's really fun to look at. All the different colors and shades in there. Kind of like a beech wood look. I really like doing it this way. So all I have to do now is put on 3 coats of polyurethane. I use the glossy because I really like the way the glossy turns out. And once the polyurethane is dry, I'm good to attach the leg assembly to the top. And I just use a couple of 2.5-inch screws on each side from the leg assembly into the top. And that should be perfectly fine for this project. I think I'm going to start talking in a second, so I'm just going to stop talking here. Alright, so that should about wrap it up for this bench build. I made 2 of these, and I made sure to put them around the breakfast nook area like my wife wanted them to be. I really like the way these turned out with the color scheme on the top and everything, and the way the feet worked out. I think I'm going to make a separate video just for making these legs with the tapered feet. So make sure you check that out and subscribe and all of that fun stuff. And as always, don't be afraid to be a doofus.